Today's GATE Equity Webinar, School Climate 201, the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. Did you know that OSPI has a YouTube channel? We archive all of our webinars. You can find past webinars on the YouTube channel. This webinar should be posted within the next 3 weeks, probably by the end of the month. Our objectives today are to understand what the TFI is, how to use it and make a difference in your school, hear from a district that demonstrates a positive school climate and how the TFI helps them, and get resources to help you get started. My name is Bonnie Zimmerman. I'm a program specialist with the Office of System and School Improvement. With us today are Joanna Brown, our School Climate Implementation Manager, Justyn Poulos, our brand new MTSS Director, for CISL, the Center for Improvement of Student Learning, and Holly Meyer, PBIS Student Support Specialist with North Thurston Public Schools. Our vision, mission, and values: all students prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. We have an equity statement. Each student, family, and community possesses strengths and cultural knowledge that benefit their peers, educators, and schools. This webinar is brought to you by the Office of System and School Improvement. We believe we are more likely to see school improvement across multiple measures if we study, support, serve, and elevate. Next month, we'll be talking about substance use. There'll be a morning and an afternoon webinar. You can register on the GATE Equity Webinar Series webpage. So right now we're going to launch a poll to see who is in the audience. Let us know if you are an administrator, counselor, teacher, parapro, parent, if you're working with the ESD, if you're one of our continuous improvement partners, whatever you are, please let us know. Now I'd like to introduce Jo Brown. She's our school climate transformation person, and she's going to tell you a little bit about the grant that she's working with.
Hi, good afternoon. We are very fortunate in Washington State to be recipients of the School Climate Transformation Grant. The grant was started last year in 2018, and it will go through 2023. The goals for the grant: first off, we get to help 30 identified school districts across the state implement multi-tiered behavioral support system, behavioral interventions and support, PBIS. We will be providing training and alignment of coaching practices statewide for OSPI staff, ESD staff, district MTSS teams, and identified MTSS coaches. And the third big goal of this grant work that we are fortunate enough to be doing is to build state capacity to implement MTSS across districts throughout our state. We will be, as a state team, we will be using the data from the TFI from the districts participating in this grant to inform our work on how to best support the districts part of this grant. The districts will be using the TFI to inform their practices, and most importantly, our schools will be using the TFI to inform their implementation work. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our MTSS Director, Justyn Poulos, who is going to talk a little bit more about the TFI and how it can help you improve the school climate at your school.
Thanks, Joanna. As we get started, I just want to get a sense of your knowledge, your experience with the TFI, so that I'm not boring you with information you already know. So take a minute, please, and just let me know if you've been a part of a team that's used the TFI in the past. I hope you'll stay engaged, and frequency fosters fluency. And for the rest of you, I hope that the next 45 minutes or hour are useful and productive time for you to learn about the TFI and how you can benefit from its use. First of all, you've already heard me say TFI. The TFI stands for Tiered Fidelity Inventory. And what it is it's a self-administered or a team-administered self-assessment at the school level, and it measures the extent to which school-wide PBIS is being implemented in the school, and it helps guide the team through a process for improving implementation for the benefit of students, families, and overall school culture. And the question of why would we take it, it's another assessment. What's the value that it gives us, right? And that's the beauty of it, is it's really a measure that is looking at the extent to which the systems are being put into place by the adults. And the critical piece to that is students don't benefit from instruction or interventions they don't receive. So I imagine we've all been part of initiatives or efforts where we say, oh, it didn't work, but the extent to which we've put it in place may or may not have, happened or been done with fidelity. And the TFI is a way for us and for you at the school level, especially, to kind of assess the extent to which it's in place and to be able to improve so that we're able to put these evidence-based practices into place really strongly for the benefit of students. Just a little background of kind of where we are in the state around the use of the TFI. Last school year, we had about just under 450 schools that have used the TFI. And of those, a little over 100 used it for the first time. When we break it down by school level, we see it's definitely skewed toward elementary schools, and that's not surprising nationally. For one, we see elementary schools tend to adopt PBIS sooner and faster than middle and high schools, but we also know we have more elementary schools in the state, which is a definite factor in the higher use of the TFI. So a couple big ideas around the TFI, and then I'll walk you through a little bit more detail of what you get when you take the TFI. So first of all, it's an online tool, and it's available for any school to take, and it's free. It is accessible, and I'll have links and resources at the end, but it's accessible at pbisassessment.org. And like I mentioned a minute ago, it's completed by a team, and it would be completed at least annually. That would be the recommendation, and that when you take it, you're going to get reports, you're going to get multiple reports, and I'll show you some examples of what those reports look like. And those are then used to help guide next steps. And the hope and the goal is that by using the TFI and the data of the TFI, one, it helps you stay focused on what to improve and what to work on. And it also helps you identify, smaller discrete steps of what to do next. And as a result of that, the time spent and the conversations that happen during the administration of the TFI save you a lot of time and effort down the road. The TFI can measure all 3 tiers of PBIS. At the universal level, there are 15 items across 3 subscales, and that's teams, implementation, and evaluation. And then similarly, Tier 2 has 13 items, Tier 3 has 17 items. The assessment can be taken across all 3 tiers at the same time, or you can choose to just take one tier and assess your Tier 1 or assess your Tier 2 based on your needs as a school and get a report and a score about graphs, etc., specifically for that tier that you're working on and that you're most focused on. The general recommendation I would have is take it across the tiers once a year, and then as you're really focused and scaling up a single tier, say, this is your first year, adopting and working on implementing PBIS, then that Tier 1 you might take 2 times or 3 times during the year. So as you start checking things off of that action plan you create, what you can do is then reassess and see back to that criteria that's set within the assessment, see how you're doing, and whether or not focus on a couple different items or areas of focus for the next few months for your team. And it just helps keeps you moving forward, and you can take bite-sized chunks of the implementation and work on them instead of being overwhelmed trying to do all of it at once. To access the TFI, the first thing is the system, the PBIS assessment system, generally recommends having one district level coordinator identified. And that coordinator is, like I said, at the district level and is the person that will then open and close windows for you to do the assessment and help with some of that management. So you can go online at PBIS assessment and type in your city or your zip code, and it'll tell you coordinators in the area. So you can see if you have a district coordinator, if you're not sure. If you do, then contact that person to help open the window and get you started, get you access to it. If you don't, then what we would recommend is identify a person, a district level person who, ideally can support multiple schools in the use of the assessment. And then there's a local coordinator information form, and we'll have a link. We'll send PowerPoint to you, and there'll be a link for that local coordinator information form. And then email it to that accounts@pbisassessment.org. They'll get you set up, and then you'll be able to access everything from there. Like I said, take it annually and then online. And again, these will all be hyperlinks here. There are 5 videos that can kind of walk you through the different aspects of taking and using the TFI. They're not very long videos. They have some role playing and stuff in them so you can see what it looks like and how to use that data. So I would definitely recommend at least someone on your team watching those videos prior to engaging in taking the assessment, using the assessment, just so you have a sense of kind of what that looks like. The reports that you'll get, there are, I think, 4 different types of reports that you can access. So you'll see here on the left, there's a total score report. And this report is looking at the overall of the whole assessment. And you can see in this example that this school had taken it 4 times, 2017, 18, and twice in 2019. And you can compare their scores across those 4 assessments. And then the next one looks at it by tier. And what you can see on the right side here is tier 1 was taken 4 times, tier 2, 3, tier 3, 2 times. And that goes back to, you don't have to take all the tiers every time. You can take some just to focus on specific aspects of your implementation. And you'll get a score kind of evaluating the overall level of implementation for each tier individually with that. The next is a subscale report. So you'll see, as I mentioned earlier, like tier 1 has 3 subscales, and those are teams, implementation, evaluation. Tier 2 are the same. Tier 3, teams, resources, support plan, and evaluation. So there's generally 2 to 5 questions or so that make up each of those subscales, and it combines those to make a single score for teaming, for example. So this kind of gives you the aggregate of those measures for teams and for your implementation, your evaluation. And then you can still drill down even more to get to the item level. So as you go down to the item level, you can see specifically like item 1, team composition, and how you reported your implementation specifically on that item. So kind of starting big and drilling down to where you see areas of need, and then items within those areas of need from the subscales will help you to develop an action plan that you can use moving forward. The action plan, and I recognize this is probably hard to read. That's okay. Don't worry about that. It will be hyperlinked. And if you have a district action plan template that you use, by all means, that's great. There's no requirement that you would use this or anything. This is a Word document, so you can continue to come back to it as a team, enter in, report your progress, etc. But you'll see on the picture here of the action planning template, it lists the TFI items going all the way down. The recommendation is not that you would create action steps all at once for every item. So pick a couple items, maybe 3 or 4, and focus on a few things that you can do really well, and then come back to the assessment to see what are the next things that you should focus on. So again, as you go through kind of the whole scope of it, you can access it at pbisassessment.org. There's a local coordinator form. If your district does not already have someone identified, you'll take at least one tier, or you can take all 3 tiers at any given time. You get the reports that you can drill down all the way down to the item level, and then you create an action plan that as a team you're going to focus on over the next couple months. Another thing that is available with the TFI is there are 2 companion guides that have been created that I think are extremely useful. And what they do is they take each of the items of the TFI, and there's an enhancement essentially explained of what it looks like through a culturally responsive lens. So if you're taking, item 1.1, your team composition, what does that look like from a culturally responsive lens of representation, who is represented on that team, et cetera, whether that's by student groups or race or ability or disability, those kinds of things, really taking a deeper look into that. And when you use those companion guides, you would take the items kind of at face value of how they're written, and then the companion guides are intended to generate conversation as a team around what actions can we do to improve this to be more culturally responsive. The same is there's one for mental health integration, and ISF is Interconnected Systems Framework, and that is looking at school-based mental health or school mental health that is integrated into the PBIS framework. And this action planning companion guide really gives some tangible look-fors of what does that look like when we're integrating school mental health within PBIS. So it's great conversation when you're taking the TFI for your team, but it's also a nice reference for you when you're saying, what does it look like to be culturally responsive in PBIS, or to think about really addressing school-wide mental health within our PBIS implementation. These are 2 tools that help operationalize some aspects of your implementation for you. Again, they are hyperlinked for you with the PowerPoint. We are going to turn it over to Holly to share what this looks like for her and her district in North Thurston Public Schools.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Holly Meyer, and I am a student support specialist at North Thurston Public Schools. In my role, I am supporting all 22 schools with PBIS, with our SEL implementation, as well as MTSS framework, and really supporting schools to ensure fidelity with those 3. I've been in education for over 20 years, and with PBIS for about 12 years now, and firm believer in all of it, and happy to be sharing our experiences with the TFI with you. Just giving you a little bit of our TFI journey, if you will. In North Thurston Public Schools, we started our PBIS journey in about 2008. And of course, we started with Tier 1 first, and it took a while for us to get to the TFI place of we're ready to measure now using that tool. So in 2013, we started with the TFI, and we only started with our Tier 1 at that point because that's really where all of our schools were at. Our goal, of course, is 70% or higher in any of the tiers, but honestly, we communicate through our district. Our goal is truly an 80%, and we're working towards that. We're on a 3-year cycle with our TFI, so 3 years later, we attempted the TFI again for all 3 tiers. That was the first time that we used it for each of the tiers, mostly because during that time we were building capacity at the schools in tiers 2 and 3. And again, our goal being 70% or higher. This year, we are happy to be on our implementation cycle of using the TFI this year only for the schools and individual peers that they received an 80% or higher score on last year. So let me explain. If they did get an 80% or higher in Tier 1, then they would, instead of using the TFI section, then we would be using the BOQ for this year only. That's benchmarks of quality assessment. In Tiers 2 and 3, if they were 80% or higher, then we would be using the BAT, the benchmarks of advanced tiers. And those are done self-assessments with each school PBIS teams at that point. Of course, our student support team is always there to come and support and sit with the team if they need us to. Again, we are trying to build capacity in our schools to be completing these on their own. So I'm happy that it'll be exciting to see what kinds of things we see from this year. So just to show you a little bit about our successes using TFI, it's an absolute great data tool for us. And this is last year's TFI for our elementary schools. We have 13 elementary schools, and as you can see, our Tier 1 and Tier 2 are solid above that 80% mark in all of our schools, which has been a huge success for us. Tier 3 is definitely one of the most challenging tiers to fully implement with Fidelity, and just ensuring and educating everyone on what that process looks like in our district. So of course, schools are doing fabulous. We're all showing great growth in that area, but we continue to work with the schools to help them, again, build capacity. In our middle school and high schools, I think it was mentioned earlier that it does seem to be a bit more challenging for the PBIS implementation to settle in the secondary level. Understandably, it's a different setting and lots of people and lots of students. But as you can see, we definitely have been working hard with our 5 middle schools, our 3 comprehensive, and we do also have 1 alternative high school as well. And looking again, we have that 80% line for our goal and working with that. And so those are the schools that will be utilizing either the BOQ or the BAT for their assessment for next year. And this information is fabulous because it's really helping us use that data for our results. So, sorry, I'm trying to close a window here. Here we go. We have been celebrating great successes with this PBIS implementation. And that is something that we continue to, as we meet with PBIS coordinators, as we meet with administrators, we continue to celebrate those successes with them because we want to continue this work. We are utilizing action plans in our district, and we have created an action plan actually for our student support department to use to help support each of the schools. Now, each school has the ability to create their own action plan as well, but this is a district-wide action plan that we use that we go over with the administration a few times a year. We decide what is going to be done internally, what are items that the district can support you on, and we color code that, and we check in and make a plan. It's very detailed, but that really holds our department accountable, and I think it gives some confidence in our department as well with the schools. And because we have been so successful this year, I'm very excited that we are at a point where we are implementing SEL curriculum, social emotional learning curriculum. We are starting with our elementary schools, mostly because you can see from our results, they have that Tier 1 down solid. And with that Tier 1 down solid, they were ready for more. So we started this year in our elementary schools implementing steps into all 15 of our schools with a master schedule that allows 20 minutes of instruction time in every classroom. So we're very excited to see what results come from that. And we continue to work on a committee for our secondary, and we'll continue to watch their TFI results to help us inform that when they're ready as well. What you're looking at now is a Tiered Fidelity inventory. This is our report. This is the report that we put together at the district office and give to each of the schools at the end of each year. And you can see in this elementary school, we label it by each of the tiers, of course, and you can see which assessments that we have used. Again, we use TFI on a 3-year cycle with some great results. Now, that Tier 3 continues. It's been great to see that jump even from 65 to 94 because last year was a training year for our administration in each building on a Tier 3 process. So we've seen extreme growth in that. So we show them the results, and then we also like to celebrate the great things that we've seen in each of the tiers. And of course, we always give them proposed action steps. We encourage each school to use their own action planning system, and these are the steps that we would encourage them to add to that. On the back of that report, we always out the TFI results. I believe you saw those on an earlier slide. Those were I'm looking for the word for it, the inventory list that you had. It was basically their scores, either a 0, 1, or 2. We only give them the results of those that they scored under a 2 on, so they knew what to work on for next year. And also always add a few little comments on the end, because when you do a tier 1 walkthrough, there's lots of parts to that, and we like to let them know how their staff responded to that walkthrough as well. What we've really been working on, and these are the questions I was sort of asked to answer for you, is how are we building the art system? And it's a lot of grassroots effort, and I think we all can agree that in our buildings, that's what it takes. But as a district-wide system, we have really been working mostly with the principals and the administrators and our cabinet members and training them on the process, on the data, how we use the data to inform, and we've spent several years on that process, and we are now just starting to really reap the benefits of that. And I think that during those principal PD times that we have, we're also allowing each school to see everybody else's data. And I think that sharing the data that way, of course, it encourages others to also try to work on their systems a little bit. And I think that sharing has made it a little more transparent, seeing the work really stepping up. We've also really made sure that we have team leaders at every school for each of our tiers. So we encourage schools PBIS Tier 1 team, and of course I shouldn't say PBIS, we're really working on that being MTSS at this time. So looking at both academic and behavior data. So our team leads facilitate Tier 1 meetings. Then there's a team lead for Tier 2 and a team lead for Tier 3. Yes, there are definitely schools that have combined their Tiers 2 and 3 teams because of size and staff, and that has been working just fine as well. But those leads are really our liaisons at the district office to really continue that work, and we provide training for those leads throughout the year as well. My advice, and I think that these can be obvious, but we always go to start with those small steps, right? And even heard it was said that it's okay, you can do just part of the TFI. And so just starting with that first Tier 1, going for that 70% goal is a great place to start. Even in I heard doing it a few times a year, and your first few years of implementation is very helpful. Yes, that data is exactly what's informing the decision on what you need to work on, which is that action plan. I definitely support the use of action plans. I think it's important in our busy lives and schedules and district and school initiatives and everything on our plate, that it's important that we really identify the needs. And I have that right in front of me all the time just to keep it fresh and to keep my accountability as well. We make sure those action plan items are also supporting school SIP plans. In our district, we are encouraging each school to have a social emotional learning goal. PBIS is really falling underneath that social emotional learning, our area and our department. So we're putting those two together. We go out, our department goes out and meets with schools 3 times a year. We go in the fall, winter, and spring to sit down with the administrators and go over these action plan items. And a lot of great conversations happen during those meetings. We're providing them with the report, we're celebrating with them, we're helping them plan for next steps. And it's just been a really good way to that communication going between all of us, making sure that all of our schools are still on board. I mean, we know it's important to continue checking in with everyone because it is all about that fidelity and making sure that we're all on the same page. We've seen some great work. I would love always available to answer questions. If you would like more information on what our district is working on, we'd be happy to do that. And I think that my email will be listed at the end. Thank you for having me today. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Holly. We're going to be here for a little bit, so if anybody has any questions, they can type them in the chat or the Q&A. I do have a couple questions. Can you share your action planning tool with the group? Is that something that you can do?
Yeah, I probably can do that and upload it into the chat.
Okay, or you can send it to Mariah or I, and we can send it out as well. I have another question. What does North Thurston use to track their student data?
We use Swiss. Yes,
Okay.
we absolutely use Swiss.
Okay, and then I guess my last question, I'm kind of new to all of this. You said that your action plan supports the school improvement plan. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. And really, I'm focusing in on the social emotional learning side of their plans. That is something that the superintendent has asked each of our schools to add to their SIP plans, because we all know what those are. It's really basically attendance and reading and math scores. We find it very important to also be tracking and improving on our behavior data, which really comes down to the positive climate. And that's why the TFI is such a great tool for helping us measure that.
And we have a question from one of our attendees, and they want to know how they can, as teachers, assist their coordinators.
Absolutely. Great question. We always appreciate it when teachers are asking those questions. So honestly, the biggest thing is to ensure that there are full systems in place, and really that is making sure that the coordinator is doing some sort of PBIS assessment. If teachers want to assist the coordinator, one way they could do that perhaps is even getting a copy of the TFI Tier 1, just so they have an idea of what systems are the best, right? We're looking for the best of everything. So I feel that the teachers are really there to just to do the work, but also make sure that they fully understand what each of the tiers entail.
Thank you. We
Thank
appreciate you being here. I know that you've been busy with the beginning of school.
So the question is from Sonia, and it's about whether there are, what I'm going to paraphrase, a recognition system for strong implementation that will be implemented statewide. It sounds like there was something like that in Mississippi. I just came from Wisconsin. We had a recognition system that we had different layers of acknowledgement for the work that schools were doing. At this point, I can't tell you if we will or will not. It's definitely in consideration on the radar. I don't know, and certainly cannot promise that there would be any financial incentives to that. I think most states do not provide financial incentives with their recognition, but more banners and maybe conference registrations, those kinds of things. That's the long answer to your question is, it's on the radar, but we don't know yet.
Thanks, Justin. We have another question for Holly. Are special educators, directors, and teachers involved in this inventory? And if so, how?
Only if they are a part of that tier team. And I would hope that those people would be represented. It's the tier team are the only people that are completing the TFI for the tier 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, so I talked about resources. We have a list of links here: PBIS apps, local coordinator information form, tutorial videos, action plan template, culture responsive practices field guide, mental health action planning and companion guide. Holly's going to provide their action planning tool for us. We'll try and get that in there as well. If you want to get personalized support from OSPI or from the Office of System and School Improvement, we have a button on our webpage. We want to help you, and that way you can talk to or get a live person to respond to your question. Again, here are our email addresses. I'm Bonnie Zimmerman. We have Joe Brown, Justyn Poulos, and Holly Meyer that are our experts in this area and would love to help you, so feel free to email them if you need to. We like to give credit where credit is due. We use the Creative Commons International License and the Noun Project for a lot of our graphics. Some of our graphics belong to the schools that we highlight. Here are some discussion questions for the chat. What were the big ideas you got from today? What are your next leadership moves? What did you value in the presentation? What questions do you still have?